Hey everybody, my name is Ian O'Byrne. I'm the current department editor for Multiliteracies in the Journal of Adolescent and Adult Literacy. Our latest column was on digital badges, and we tried to put together a nice column that would give an overview of digital badges for the smart and savvy educator. We are looking at educators in secondary and higher ed, but honestly, most of the stuff that we've talked about could be used in pre-K through higher ed and also out-of-school placements. So this series of interviews is a way for us to talk with experts, and I had the honor and privilege of talking with one of the authors on the column. Katerina, you want to introduce yourself, please? Tell us where you are now.
Sure. My name is Katerina Schenke. I'm a PhD candidate at the University of California, Irvine. I am finishing up this year, so that's exciting. I study kind of learning in different learning contexts, issues around how different environments, whether it's classrooms or digital learning environments, help motivate students and specifically for math and science domains.
Very cool. And where did you just sign on to? Where will we find you next?
So I have just agreed to take a postdoc at UCLA. It'll be with UCLA and CREST, which is the Center for Research on Education Standards and Student Effectiveness.
Very, very cool.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the first things that we've done throughout the interviews is we've asked people what are digital badges. It's sort of interesting that we all, are studying the same thing, but we're defining it different ways. So for you, what are digital badges? How do you define or describe them?
Yeah, so the definition that we've used in our work, which has been floating around, the one by Knight and Cassili, is web-enabled tokens of accomplishment, which contain specific claims and evidence about learning and circulate in social networks that bad issuers and earners participate in. So this is kind of this is the official definition that we've been operating off of. And to me, it's useful to understand how open digital badges differ from grades, traditional Girl Scout badges, or even kind of the sticker charts that are posted in classrooms, which are all tokens of accomplishment. So to me, they're different because, for one, you have evidence that's contained within the badge. So because they're digital, you can attach a movie or an article that someone wrote and find that within the badge, with the click of a button. They're also different because they're intended to circulate in learners' social networks. So kids and badge earners are encouraged to post these on Facebook or LinkedIn or blogs that they're a part of and kind of take them as part of their identity. So I think those are, to me, the key differences between how we think about open digital badges versus just kind of these things that are also, tokens of accomplishment like grades, or even, people get those accomplishments in games like World of Warcraft.
So, I mean, it's interesting we talk about, students getting these tokens of accomplishment and then sharing them out. When I was growing up, I would get a B+ or an A on a spelling test, and my mother would put it up on the refrigerator. Now we think about our students, if the parents aren't Snapchatting or tweeting or Instagramming the test, we think about our students sharing that out. So how do badges interact? How might badges affect student motivation in this learning ecosystem, understanding that that ecosystem or that classroom could be beyond, or expanded from that traditional those classroom walls. So how does it affect motivation?
Yeah, that's a question that we haven't been able to directly answer at this point. So a lot of the work that I've been doing with Dan Hickey and the people at Indiana is thinking about kind of the theoretical implications that motivation might have. So far we've done a lot of work on studying badges within the projects and less work on how students interact with the digital badges. But we know a lot from motivation theory to kind of help us in understanding what could happen. So one big point that I think needs to be made, and I'm sure it's already been made, but I'll make it again, is that badges in and of themselves don't motivate or demotivate learners. So it's not the physical thing or the digital thing that can motivate learners. It's all of the stuff around them. So thinking about the badge ecosystem, the context it's in, whether it's an after-school program or the classroom, it's the individuals that students interact with, like the adults that run these after-school programs. It's how badges connect out of school within school. So I think with any kind of thing, there's always going to be instances in which students kind of react positively to badges and put forth the effort and learning to get the badge and share them with friends. And there's always going to be instances in which they don't engage with them. So if we can find these contexts in which we have these kind of positive examples of when badges could work, then I think those kinds of case studies can then be scaled up. So we've done kind of some preliminary interviews with some students in the UK with S2R medals on earning the badge, and a lot of the things that these students talked about was this idea of that the badge that they earned outside of school, they could submit to their teacher and have that be as part of their grade. And also the idea that they could use a badge, put it on their CV, or talk about it in their college essays. So this idea of using badges in contexts that learners value really matters. So just like with any other technology, we can't just we don't want to give learners badges for things that they already enjoy doing. So there's been a long line of literature on the overjustification effect from the 70s in which they gave kids, prizes for things that they already like doing, like drawing, and that causes them to not like it anymore. So that would be kind of one way that we know badges could demotivate learners, is if we did that.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges is that we set out to write a column that would give people an overview of what currently is happening in badges, and it still is a murky soup. There's a lot that we don't know. We're, as a community, the research badging community and the badging, the community that's issuing badges, and we're all trying to figure out what's happening. But there's a lot in terms of motivation we don't understand. We're figuring out the ecosystem. We're figuring out the individual implications and attitudes to badging. So we're still trying to make sense of it. I think we did a good job pulling together a concise, comprehensive overview of badges. One of the things that we talk about in that involves badges as an assessment device. So I mean, in that learning ecosystem, either inside of school context or outside of school, what are possibilities for badges as an assessment? We talked about token of achievement. What about badges as a form of assessment or as evidence of successful completion of assessment?
Yeah, I think that the assessment question really derives from the recognition question. So what do we, what kinds of learning do we want to recognize, and then how do we go on and assess that? So one of the things that I think digital badges have a lot of potential for is to kind of recognize learning that happens outside of school. So let's say a kid is taking a programming class in school. It's super boring. They're not doing well. It doesn't mean that they don't like programming. It just means that in that context, they're not engaging with it. So kind of using, maybe a teacher instead could award a badge for something that the kid was doing outside of school that's maybe still related to the content. So I mean, to me, the assessment question is a little bit more secondary to the recognition question.
Awesome. Well, I mean, so to wrap up, my last question would be, for educators, secondary higher ed educators, they are setting up their classes or they're developing classes. They, as you're creating your class, you're thinking about student learning objectives. You're developing that ecosystem, that the culture of your class. You're figuring out what students will recognize and students will believe in or work for. What are things that what are things that instructors need to know as they're developing this ecosystem? What are ways that they could and should use badges, or what should they consider as they're thinking about bringing badges into teaching and learning in their classroom?
Sure. I guess one kind of caution that I would have is for teachers and practitioners not to just substitute grades with digital badges. That'll just lead to kind of the same problems that we already have with grades. These, cheating, competition, marginalizing students who, who aren't doing well. I do kind of what I see as interesting. An interesting use of badges in a classroom context is as a way to bring the conversation that's happening in the classroom outside of the classroom. So, for example, kids in school could be working on a cool science project. Wouldn't it be great for teachers to design some kind of platform maybe that students already use, like Facebook, creating a Facebook group, and having digital badges kind of spur more conversations about in-school topics in an out-of-school context. Another way that I can think about teachers using badges to recognize learning is what I mentioned before, is using it as an opportunity to recognize and value learning that happens outside of school in a school context. So it might be that teachers notice that some students they spend a lot of free time, let's say, playing video games, and some people might say that that's not real academic work, but if they can find ways to kind of engage those students in things that they're already doing and give them academic credit for it, I think that would be a way to kind of positively motivate students.
So I thank you for the time to talk about the column. I think that we put together a piece that will hopefully move the field. How can people get in touch with you online if they have more questions? How do they get in touch with you on the internet?
Sure. So I do have a website. It is my full name.com, so KaterinaSchenke.com. That's also my Gmail address, KaterinaSchenke@gmail. So I do have a web presence. So feel free to Google me or look me up.
And I'll share the video and all these links out in a blog post and share that out with all the other interviews. So once again, this is a part of a column that we put together on digital badges for the Journal of Adolescent and Adult Literacy. We wanted to put together a column that would give an overview of digital badges and contextualize this within the classroom to talk about that motivation and the recognition and possibly the assessment that we could see in badges. We'll put all these videos together as a way to extend the learning, so we please ask you to read the column, watch the videos, and then have your own response. Test out badges in your classroom, test them out with your students, blog about it, write about it, send us a video, podcast, whatever your heart desires. Respond back and let us know what you're thinking. Katerina, any last words?
I don't know. I think I pretty much covered it in my responses.
No, totally cool. Well, thank everybody for watching, and with that, we'll wrap up.